This is the DRF Sports Form podcast. Here's your host, Peter Thomas Fornatale.
Hello and welcome to the DRF Sports Form podcast. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatale, back with you in the Brooklyn bunker once again. Chilly outside, real football weather in New York. Crisp, not too cold. Not the sexiest weekend of the season in terms of NFL action, but still some interesting things to talk about, as well as a college game, the college game in many ways. Army-Navy will be on the agenda for today. I am joined by the managing editor of the DRF Sports Form. He is Scott Gramling. Scott, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Pete. Great to talk to you as always.
Absolutely. JK on vacation today. We'll bring him back next week. We haven't figured out all the particulars of how we're going to do this college bowl game special, but there will be an extra long show next week, or maybe even two shows. We'll decide how we want to divvy it up. But let's save Army-Navy for the end, I think, and let's start off looking at this slate of NFL action. You mentioned to me in your note about what we were going to talk about this week. Some don't know this. Scott, in addition to being the managing editor of Sports Form, handicapper in his own right, appears on this podcast, also the content producer in many ways of this show. You mentioned not quite as many marquee matchups as in previous weeks.
You know, what sometimes happens here with the schedule making is they try to really load the last couple weeks of the season with divisional matchups. So week 17 is all 16 divisional matchups. And they also try and load a lot of divisional matchups in week 16. So here we are in week 14. A lot of times you get a little bit of a lull where there are some divisional matchups here. The AFC South is all matching up, but and the AFC East is actually matching up. But those are the two divisions that really are the least compelling, the AFC South, because of the fact that there's just not anybody that's challenging the Texans at this point. Colts with a very disappointing loss, a shutout loss against a Jacksonville team that's been reeling.
That was
and
ugly.
then the AFC East, it's Patriots and everybody else, like it seems to always be. So those are the divisional matchups really this week. And, there's a couple others, Giants, Redskins, but there's nothing to write home about with that. Otherwise all interdivisional matchups, except for some key NFC games that we're going to go through.
Absolutely. And we'll start off talking about one of those involving Dallas and Philadelphia. The power ratings suggesting that Dallas might offer some value in this one. What's your take on the game?
Yeah, the power ratings of Dallas have risen somewhat significantly in recent weeks, especially because of the most recent win going against the Saints. And you absolutely deserve a lot of credit for that win, for what they did defensively in that game. To me, however, I think you have a Philadelphia team, as strange as it is to say that the defending champion is flying under the radar a little bit. I kind of feel like that's a little bit of the case here. And when you look at what the Eagles have done, really up until this point in the season, it's been very unimpressive. But now in the past couple of weeks are kind of putting things together a little bit. When you look at the Dallas-Philadelphia matchup, for whatever reason, it's been the road team that has excelled since the start of the 2010 season. The road team is 13-4 straight up and 11-6 against the spread in Eagles-Cowboys games. So I think that when you look at that, you don't want to read too much into it, but I think the story it tells behind it is these teams are so familiar with each other and with each other's venues that I don't think you give the Cowboys much, if any, credit for being the home team here. I also feel like with the Eagles, they're becoming a bit healthier on offense. They're kind of pulling things together on offense. Again, this is an offense that did not really have a preseason and missed the first couple of weeks of the regular season in Carson Wentz and Alshon Jeffrey. I feel like with Golden Tate, who they acquired at the trade deadline before their bye week, he seems to be becoming more acclimated into that offense the past couple of weeks. And I think that's a factor here as well, where you have an Eagles team that is really pulling things together offensively. And to me, in this kind of a divisional matchup, look, the Cowboys are 7-5, the Eagles are 6-6. I just feel like these are evenly matched teams. Whenever I can get more than 3 points, I'm going to take it, and that's the case here.
It makes perfect sense, and you make a good point, I think. Not that there's any magic to why the road team has been doing so well in the series, but just how evenly matched they are as these divisional opponents who know each other so well. And you think about the hype and the way we discussed the game just a few weeks ago with the big upset win by Dallas, being able to then come in and have those kind of points on your side is probably a little more appealing, even given what the computer says about their merits in theory. And I would think that generally speaking, when you're looking at division rivals, is that the case for you, that the power rating might not be as much signal in that as with teams that don't have that type of familiarity?
It's exactly right, Pete. It's exactly right. I feel like that when you're talking about AFC team versus an NFC team, these are teams that play each other once every 4 years. There are instances where NFC teams or AFC teams from different divisions play each other only 3 times a year. I really do think that the power ratings can kind of help guide you in those instances. Here, I think there's enough sample size between these teams, and you look at the head coaches, for instance, and you look at a guy like Jason Garrett, and the Cowboys just under Garrett have not really been able to achieve sustained success. And you look at some of the trends. Dallas 2-10 against the spread at home under Garrett, when coming off a game where the team allowed 14 points or fewer. They're 9-26 against the spread at home under Garrett, against the defense allowing a completion rate of at least 61%. I feel like that there are numbers here, and the one that I've looked most strongly into is there's a betting system here where when you look at the Eagles, yes, they went 0-3 against the spread in November prior to Monday night's win against the spread and straight up against Washington. But that sets them up. Road teams are 40-15-1 against the spread in December games since the start of 2014, after failing to cover the spread in 3 of the previous 4 games. I think what that points to is a bit of undervaluing of a team like the Eagles, coming off 3 against the spread losses in their last 4. And what you point out is exactly right. You have a divisional game, and this to me it's a toss-up game. If this game were at a neutral site, I think you would set the spread at Pick'em. And again, because you're getting that extra half point, that can come into play here. Now, there have been some lopsided outcomes in this head-to-head series in recent years, but they've really been all in the favor of Philadelphia when the games have been played at Dallas. So the Eagles have won 6 of the last 8 trips to Dallas, and 3 of those 6 wins have been by double digits. That was 37-9 last season, 33-10 in 2014, 20-7 in 2011. The Cowboys' 2 wins over the Eagles at home over the last 8 years, they've been by fewer than 7 points. So even when the Eagles have lost games at Dallas recently, they have not been blowouts. And I think when you look at what Carson Wentz has been able to do, in 4 career starts in this rivalry matchup, he's completed 67% of his passes, 7 touchdowns, just 1 interception. I just feel like this is a good matchup for Philly, despite the fact that Dallas did go in there and upset the Eagles in Philadelphia early in the season. And that is also something that I like to look at. When teams are playing each other for a second time in a season, sometimes some of the mainstream media gets a little caught up in, it's a revenge game.
Angle, yeah.
Right? I mean, I don't these are 53 independent contractors on each side. They are not, for the most part, sitting there and being like, oh, we got to get revenge on those Cowboys. But what does end up happening in these instances, and we've talked about it here on the show previously, is you have a Cowboys team in going through their game plan that will say, you know what? We're going to do a lot of the same things we did where we had success against the Eagles when we won in Philadelphia early in the year. We're going to add a few wrinkles in there. But fundamentally, it's going to be a similar game plan because that's something that's relatively easy to sell into the players. I think on the flip side of that, the Eagles come out with a bit of an unknown game plan to the Cowboys. They're going to go to the drawing board and say, these are the things we did against Dallas early in the year that did not work. Here, therefore, is what we're going to do. And it often is why the team that lost the previous game is able to catch the team that won the previous game a bit off guard. Yeah. And, the shining example of that is going back to I believe it was 2010 when the Patriots blew out the Jets 45-3 on a Monday night game in December. The two teams met again in Foxborough in the playoffs. The Jets won. They won by 3, but that was because of a late score by the Patriots. They kind of won that game rather handily. And Rex Ryan had trotted out he had 11 active defensive backs in that game. And he just kind of said, you know what? I know what the Patriots do. When they see this many defensive backs on the field, they run the ball, and that's what they allowed the Patriots to do. And the Patriots were running the ball 5-6 yards at a clip up the middle with Danny Woodhead, and the Jets were just letting them do it, but they were clamping down in the red zone. They were holding the Patriots to punts and to field goals. And again, I know that's just one example, but I think that illustrates
it's interesting
why these are, quote unquote revenge games in the media, but really what they are, it's game planning, and it's selling in a game plan of, hey, we lost the last time, we're going to do some different things, whereas the other team sticks mainly to that script and the opposition team knows that script.
That plan, funny enough, sounding oddly like Belichick's own game plan in the 1991 Super Bowl, a game I remember with great fondness. I once had the pleasure of writing a chapter in a book, a football history book, about the greatest games in Giants history, and I got to do one chapter that was a double on the championship game against the Niners, and then following it up with the Super Bowl against the Bills, and was really one of the most fun things I ever worked on, getting to watch those games over and over again. But let's move on.
I have a quick anecdote
for
you on that game. So I watched that game with a friend of mine and his father was in a box pool, and he had the 2 and the 0, and he was a huge Giants fan. He had the Bills 2 and the Giants 0. Okay. This was a massive pool. This was a pool. It was $100,000. The winner got $50,000. The halftime got $20,000, and it was 10 for the quarters, and then 10,000 went to the fire department. So he had already won because it was 12-10 Bills at halftime.
Yep.
So he had won the $20,000 at the half, and they're lining up for the field goal. And he was a fire chief, my buddy's dad. And I was in his face. I was like, what are you rooting for, Chief? What are you rooting for, Chief? And he was claiming he was rooting for a miss so the Giants would win the Super Bowl. But I knew he was lying. He was rooting for $50,000.
Low key.
And afterward, he's like, no, I was rooting for the miss. I was rooting for the miss. He's like, because I already won the $20,000 at halftime. He did admit, had he not won the $20,000 at halftime, he would have been rooting for the field goal to be good. But how torn are you on that? Right?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Not having won the Super Bowl, but $50,000 hanging in the balance. And again, the numbers, the 2 and the 0, back then, if I'm not mistaken, I think that was back before the 2-point conversion.
It would have been,
so
for sure.
Get a 2 was really hard to do.
Those are terrible numbers, yeah.
It was terrible, but they got the Bills got the safety early in the game, and all of a sudden it was in play. But
that's great.
That's my memory, not being a fan of either team, but it was a riveting situation to be able to witness for me.
We could do a whole podcast on those two games, and maybe at some point when football's over, we'll do some historic reachbacks here. But we have too much to cover to go further down the rabbit hole. As tempted as I am to do so, I want to talk about the Sunday night game where the Rams travel to the Bears. Looking through the sports form, we have the Rams here as 3-point favorites and an over-under of 52. I did notice this stat in the sports form about how when Chicago has played a team averaging greater than 5.65 yards a play this season, the games are 6-0 to the over. That one just stood out in my head as one possible idea. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, this is a case here where I do like the over and I do like the Bears. I can't say I love the Bears in this spot, but I feel like that this is a bounce back spot for them. I think that, when you look at what the Bears have done, 9-2-1 against the spread as a home underdog since the start of 2016, they do tend to rise to the occasion at home against these tough offensive teams. And let's face it here, the Rams have not faced that many pass rushes like the Bears present here, and not just with Khalil Mack off the edge, although he is the main character in that, but Akeem Hicks up the middle as well. I feel like that this is a spot here with the Rams in colder weather. You look at the fact that the Rams 3-12 against the spread versus teams averaging at least 7 yards per pass attempt since 2016. I think what's relevant about that is the Bears, although they wouldn't be categorized in an offensive juggernaut, they can move the ball through the air, especially if Trubisky ends up playing, and he is leaning toward playing here. And, it's sometimes people overrate the quarterback position. I don't think Trubisky is a superstar by any means, but I think what we saw in the Bears-Giants game is that Chase Daniel just doesn't have the arm strength or the mobility of somebody like Trubisky to run that Nagy system. Matt Nagy, the head coach who had been the offensive coordinator at Kansas City, has really worked wonders with this offense. It's both his system and the fact that they signed Allen Robinson. They have a solid rookie in Anthony Miller. They brought in Trey Burton. But most of all, they found a way to use Tariq Cohen and his talents out of the backfield as a receiver out of the backfield. I really do like the underdog in this spot here. As good as the Rams have been, I feel like the Bears deserve a lot of credit for what they've done, and I think they're a tad undervalued here coming off that loss against the Giants. I don't think the Bears would be getting the full 3 if they were coming off a win against the Giants. And I do think with Trubisky in there, the outcome of that overtime game against the Giants might have been a bit different.
That was a wild game. And
it really was.
One thing that I think will get lost to history in it is how fortunate the Bears were in terms of fumble luck. With the quarterback alone, I think, putting the ball on the carpet 3 times and getting it back.
It was fumble luck, but it was also those kind of fumbles that, a lot of times these non-contact fumbles, the offense does recover it a lot more
than
often.
50-50.
Exactly, right? It's more of a, I don't know. I almost call those half fumbles where,
That's interesting.
It loses a snap and then just kind of quickly falls on it. And, the exchanges were, they were awful. I mean, I'm not sure what, I know Chase Daniel hasn't had a lot of reps, but still some of that looked like, backup college quarterback type stuff that you often see. The ball handling in the backfield was absolutely abysmal for the Bears.
The public, I would agree, is going to typically overrate the difference in players like those two. But I will just say this: if I were interested in backing the Bears, I would feel significantly better, even if mathematically it wouldn't mean more than a point or two. I'd feel better with Trubisky back there. And hey, a point or two can be a whole lot in a game that's right around 3. It can be a significant actionable difference. But I like where you're going with that one. The other game I definitely want to talk about is the Monday night matchup with the Seahawks hosting the Vikings. Here we have Seattle as a 3-point favorite and an over-under of 45.5. And Mr. Efficiency, Russell Wilson, looking good lately. And according to the power ratings, that 3 might not be enough in terms of what Seattle should be expected to win by. What's your take on this game?
Yeah, I do like Seattle in this one. And we spoke on last week's show a bit about Minnesota and how Minnesota had been trending as one of those teams that wins the games they're supposed to win and loses the games where they're facing opponents that have a winning record. And, still to this point, Minnesota has not won or covered a spread this season against a team that currently has a winning record. And that was the case in that New England game. And we were leaning heavily toward New England in that one, in large part for that reason, that Minnesota has been this kind of team that, plays just kind of right down the middle. And you find these teams, you tend to find 2 or 3 of them a year that are very consistent in the way they perform in terms of, beating and even sometimes beating handily the weaker competition. And that has been the case really since midseason, all season long, really, with Minnesota, where, their wins have come against Arizona, the Jets, Detroit, and Green Bay. That's their last 4 wins since mid-October. And the losses have been in New Orleans, Chicago, and New England. The Seattle team seems to have pulled it together with the offensive line. And, in putting together this week's Sports Forum, we had a lot of conversations about this game and about Pete Carroll and how Pete Carroll really, it sounds weird to call him an underrated coach, but I think a lot of people going into the season, and myself included, really thought that talent-wise, this Seattle team was a sub-500 team. But they've pulled things together despite the whole dismantling of that Legion of Boom, and with an entirely revamped secondary, they've got inside track on a playoff spot here. They're 7-5, 7-3-2 against the spread, and I really think this is a good spot here. Even laying the 3.5, I generally don't like laying the hook, but everything that Minnesota has shown me to this point in the season, I don't think that they're up to the task playing in a tough environment on a Monday night against a team that has really been trending up in Seattle. And, one of the things we did in this week's Sports Forum and we'll be doing going forward is offering up the game results, both straight up and against the spread for each team. And I think what that does, it really offers a clear-cut picture of what these teams have been doing in recent weeks. And you look at Seattle, and really they have, since the start of October, they've had some impressive wins and some impressive covers. They did lose to the Rams at home, but lost, by only a couple of points. And then they went and played at Rams, and they lost by 5 as a 9.5-point underdog. But, this is a team in Seattle, 6-1-1 against the spread since the start of October. I really do like them pretty significantly here against the Vikings.
I'm going to put them on the list to talk about whether we talk about their game or not next week with JK, his theories about being so interested in different coach quarterback combinations and giving extra credit or penalizing. I've never talked to him about his opinions on Wilson, but I do think there is something very interesting of the field general about him. And while others are going to be having splashier numbers, that sort of efficient quarterback play and making the big plays at the right time, it doesn't seem like it's randomness with that guy. It seems like there's definitely something to it. And now the numbers don't exactly bear this out this season, but in my head, both these teams are very home road splitty in a way that would favor Seattle as well. So another reason to maybe move a little bit, at least in that direction from my point of view. We don't have a ton of time left on the show, and we still have plenty to cover. Before we get to the Army-Navy game, Scott, I want to give you a chance to pick a game and present a best bet for us on this NFL slate, if it's not one of the ones we've already talked about.
Yeah, Pete, I love the Chiefs this week. I think the Chiefs giving less than a touchdown, and the spread sits at 6.5 right now. To me, I give a lot of credit to the Ravens and rookie quarterback Lamar Jackson. He's won each of his first 3 NFL starts. But those wins have come at home against the Bengals and Raiders. I'm not sure there's a couple of worst teams in the league right now, to be quite honest. And then a win on the road this past Sunday against the Falcons. Those three teams are combined 11-25 straight up this season, a combined 2-13 since the start of November. They're going now against a Chiefs team. This is a completely different level, and it's a different kind of environment. Arrowhead's always been a tough place to play, but they are really backing this team right now. It's an exciting team with some exciting skill position players. This kind of environment for a rookie quarterback, to me, is just a really tough spot. You know, the Chiefs 10-2, the only losses they've suffered this season, each by 3 points, and on the road against the 9-3 Patriots and the 11-1 Rams.
Yeah, not much shame there.
Team. It's an elite team. Yeah. So this, I'm surprised. I really thought this spread would be 7.5, and even at 7.5, I like the Chiefs here. You look them at home. 5-0 at home this year, average margin of victory more than 16 points per game at home. They've won all 5 of those games by more than 7 points. I'm sorry, by 7 or more points. One of them was exactly by 7. Chiefs 6-0 against the spread as a home favorite of between 3.5 and 7 points since the start of last season. I just think, Baltimore's calling card is its defense. And, they're the only team in the NFL that's allowing an average of fewer than 285 yards per game. But Kansas City is 4-1 against the spread since the start of 2016 when facing teams with defenses that are giving up an average of that few yards per game. So I think that, while the Lamar Jackson story has been a nice story, he's not an NFL-ready passer. And I just think when you look at the fact he has yet to go up against an opposing team that's averaging as many as 25 points per game, the Chiefs lead the NFL with an average of 37 points per game. Jackson and Baltimore, they've yet to reach 175 passing yards in any of the 3 games Jackson has started. I just don't think that they're going to be able to put up the kind of points they're going to need to stay with the Chiefs and keep the final outcome of this one to within single digits.
Baltimore 6-6 against the spread, also 3-3 away. Certainly this game will be on, I think, most teaser cards. The idea of being able to get the Chiefs just to win feels like something that's going to happen more than 3/4 of the time, I would think. Yeah. And but you make a good case that even laying the points, that could be a game to pay a lot of attention to.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about Army-Navy.
Yes.
Now, Navy are the closest thing I have to a college football team. Growing up in New York, not a whole lot of college football. I guess technically, some New Yorkers might go for Army just based on the geography. But for me, really didn't have a team at all growing up. Would just gravitate to different players. Herschel Walker being the first one who I ever really fell for and got me involved. But as time went on, and I met the woman who was to become my wife, and her father, lifelong Navy man, sub-captain, and going to the games with him down in Annapolis, and this will be my 3rd Army-Navy game. So fun going and meeting up at the tailgate with the class of 58 before the games, and seeing those guys and talking football with them. And I just love this as an old school sporting event. I think it's super cool, and I'm happy to be hopping on the Chinatown bus and heading down to Lincoln Financial on Saturday.
Jealous.
It's gonna be.
I'm jealous.
You should make this a point one year for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have to. I absolutely have. It's a bucket list item. You got
to get it done. And but so now, what I need from you, this is horribly muggish, of course, but I want to bet where I don't have to root against Navy. So that means either I want you to convince me that Navy is value being the dog for the first time in literally as long as I can remember in this series, or I want you to give me something on the total. if you can conjure either of those.
I will give you something on the total. And this total is 40, which is extremely low. Now,
it seems crazy. Not only is that low, having watched these teams this year, it seems like something just made up.
It is. I honestly think, Pete, that I think there are so many bettors out there.
What am I missing?
Well, you're missing the recent history, and you're missing the fact that this game has gone under the total now for 12 straight years.
There you go.
However, the total has never been this low. Now, look at last year's game, right? It was 14-13. That game was in the snow. So I kind of throw that one out. The two games before that were 21-17, and, it was in favor of Army. The one before that was Navy. They are different teams, and the biggest difference is Navy cannot stop anybody this year.
Yeah,
they really have given up an awful lot of points and an awful lot of yards. I just don't see this being – these teams have come into this game in recent years with strong defenses, yet the totals in recent years – last year it was 45, and that was a little weather related. The totals going back from there were posted at 47.5, 49.5, 55.5, 49, 55.5, 56, 52.5. I mean, these numbers these are 2 touchdowns more than 40. It's crazy. To me, I understand that there are probably bettors out there that's like, you know what? It's automatic. I'm just going to bet the under in Army Navy. But the bookmakers have adjusted to that. 40 is so low. If you just looked at the metrics of this game and you threw the names Army and Navy out, I know you can't do that exclusively and only handicap that way. The total would be set in the high 40s on this. So you're getting at least a touchdown advantage. Now, you look when it's Army-Navy, and there is emotion in this game, and there is defenses rising to the occasion, and you also have the element of these defenses are familiar with the kind of offense that the opposing team is playing because that's what their team is playing, right? So you're not going to catch anybody off guard with the triple option, and college practice time isn't the amount of pro practice time. So when during the regular season a team's going to be facing Army, a team like San Jose State is going to be going against Army, they can only do so much to prepare for that, and the result ends up being Army winning 52-3 and putting up a lot of yards and points. So you can't expect that Army's going to have the offensive success against Navy and vice versa in this one. However, it just it really just doesn't play out here that the total should be set this low. I think it's the best play on the game is over. It is bucking the trend of what's happened in this game in recent years, but only in relation to where the line has been set. And I feel like, you go back 2013, the over-under is 49. There's 41 points scored in that game. 2011, over-under is 56, and there's 49 points scored in that game. The year before that, it was 48 points scored. I feel like this has, at the very least, I could see Navy in the high teens and Army in the high 20s. And, we're calling it in the sports form, Army 32, Navy 21. That's really what the numbers and the point system kind of bear out. Navy, if you're just looking at the metrics, should be getting more than 7 points, but I think 7 is the right number here because of the rivalry element of this, and because when you look at the fact that this is the game to quote unquote save Navy's season,
right.
and
that's definitely a real thing. And the way their season has gone, this has been the sole focus for 6 weeks for a coach as good as they have to know that far out that this. I mean, gosh, any year a win against Army is to many supporters of the program the whole show, and then a year like this with the disappointment and the underperformance, it's just like that times 10. So I think that same point, if you just looked at the numbers. If you just looked at the numbers, you took team names away, what's the spread here? 10, 10.5?
Yeah, it is 13? In that range. It's 10 or 11.
Just based on the current form of the teams. But right. I just wouldn't be in a hurry to treat it that way when you're dealing with a coach as good as you have on that Navy sideline, and just what this game means to the institution, really.
You're absolutely right. And keep in mind too that the Army hasn't played since November 17th. Navy hasn't played since November 24th. So these teams are as familiar with each other and as well prepared. And again, it's, I really try and stay away from the cliche of throw the records out. But if ever there is a game to throw the records out, it's this one. And if ever there's a game where there's going to be a group of young men truly playing for pride, it is this game. Yeah. And therefore, if I had to take a side, I would have to lean ever so slightly with Army, just because they have been significantly.
The math demands it. I think the math. I think if you're taking a side, it's. I mean, it feels like it's Army or pass, and for me, in the sides, it'll be pass. It'll be a token wager. On that over, which, there's a lot of reasons you've explained very well why that number is where it is, but I still think it might have gone too far. And obviously, I'll just be pulling for Navy. I need a new midshipman hat too, so I'll pick that up down there as well. I can't wait. It's gonna be fun, and I appreciate all your help on this game and all the games this week, Scott.
Thanks, Pete. This is. It's always a lot of fun being on this podcast, and it's just a little extra juice here in the Army-Navy game. And the fact that it's the only game this week and we can focus on it, it is truly America's game. Again, I'm jealous at heading down there. Maybe next year I'm going to be joining you because
Make a point.
I got to get to one of those.
Let's do it, man. All right, that's it for episode number 10. I didn't give the show number up front after bothering to look it up. Show 10 of the DRF Players Podcast, the December 6th. Edition. We will be back next week. I want to thank Scott Gramling. Most of all, I want to thank all of you for tuning in and all of your support and tweets and emails to podcast@drf.com. All that stuff gets read, and we always appreciate the feedback. And next week's going to be a lot of fun. We haven't figured out exactly what it's going to be, but we will be going deep into college football. We'll be looking ahead to the NFL, and I hope you join us for that. And if you're betting this weekend, I hope all the bounces go your way.